Chapter 63. Alden stood in front of Stuart's door, pondering what to say. Visiting him wasn't a requirement for this special quest, but it had obviously been what she wanted. And Alden felt like she'd been treating him better than she had to, maybe even better than she should have, and he figured he should do the thing right in return. He tried to remember his first impressions of the Artonan boy and combined them with his newest one. He's really serious about things I barely understand. And, I think, the guy is socially awkward by both Artonan and Earthling standards. Plus, he's grown up in what's obviously a high-pressure environment even if most people seem to be in chill mode here this evening. I don't know what to do with all of that. You know, he whispered, I'm not sure I'm the correct person for a friend-making mission at the moment. I'm probably off personality-wise myself right now. He'd thought he was dying. Then he'd felt like he was dying. Then he'd gotten to talk to Aunt Connie. Chicago still existed. Earth was still blue. Alden was spying on the Primaries family. He wanted to go home and see everyone and stand under his own planet's sun, and simultaneously, he wanted to be alone in a dark room for a few weeks. Nothing felt quite right or real. He decided he would just knock, say, hello, please help me get back home, and figure out how to be friendly to Stuart from there based on the guy's reactions. He knocked. He heard the sound of footsteps, then a boy several inches shorter than him opened the door. He was in the pared-down version of the wizard's uniform that students wore at Leaf Song, and he had thin gold rings wrapping both of his irises, which were a slightly unsettling bright rust color. His shoulder-length brown hair was still sporting the dramatic and unflattering style he had adopted for mysterious reasons in the wake of the Mission incident. Half-shaved bald, half-French braided. Hello, said Alden. Stuart's pale face paled further. He opened his mouth slightly, closed it again, and then, without blinking, he slowly shut the door on Alden. And did not reopen it. That wasn't one of the reactions I'd planned for, Alden muttered, staring at the brown wood. He waited a couple of minutes, then knocked again. Stuart single quote H. He said, tucking in the direction of the door's access panel on the off chance it worked like an intercom. Hi. It's Alden Thorne. We've met before. I think you probably remember. I brought you third meal. He paused, knocked some more when there was no reply, and then added, just in case it wasn't clear, I'm not dead. I'm here at your house unexpectedly, though. Sorry if I scared you. The door finally slid open again. I did not succumb to fear, Stuart said quickly. Sure you didn't. Alden held up the meal container. Let me in your room. The Artonan boy hesitated, then stepped aside. All of the places Alden had seen so far during his work as the room service guy had been customized for their occupant, and this one was no different. But Stuart's tastes were unusual. He had almost no furniture and a ridiculous amount of floor space. Everything functional was tucked into a wall nook, from a standing desk with a pair of screens over it to his bed. He had plenty of square footage for an entire living room set, but he'd opted for nothing but a bare wood floor. Where do you want your food? Put it anywhere. The only place in the room that wasn't neat as a pin was the desk, and it was covered in some delicate-looking glowing glass thing that might have been anything from an art piece to Stuart's schoolwork. Alden wasn't going to risk knocking it over, so he set the container the only other place he could. The floor. When he turned around, he found that Stuart had sneaked up behind him. To stare. They were standing half an inch apart. Oh. That's close, said Alden, taking a step back. There were splashing sounds coming from the closed door to his left. Maybe Stuart had left the bath running. The entire campus heard you died on an assignment for Superior Professor Rodin. I had someone check, and the likelihood of your survival was so low that no resources would ever be wasted on a rescue attempt. You were probably not really here. Startled, Alden asked, what do you think's happening right now, then? Did Artonans believe in ghosts? Kibbe hadn't mentioned it. I believe I am hallucinating greater than, as I used to in my childhood. It's probably been brought on by the stress of socializing with my university peers. If I converse with you, I will detect more and more flaws in your presence, and then you will vanish. He'd had hallucinations as a kid. In that case, he was handling Alden's arrival shockingly well. He had to be freaking out right now. No, Alden said hastily. You won't detect flaws in my presence. I promise. I'm really here. Stuart narrowed his eyes. You speak Artonan. You did not previously. That is a flaw. No, it's not. I've been speaking nothing else for the past several months while I was trapped on Munthagund with an Artonan and no contract translation. Listen to me. I'm sure I have an unusual accent. Would a hallucination have an accent? Alden thought this was a good argument, but Stuart didn't agree. The Thagunda's accent is distinctive, as are some of the human quirks of your speech. I think I am fully capable of hallucinating those. Alden grabbed him by the shoulders. Stuart looked startled. Then he said, Avowed do not usually initiate greater than contact like this with wizards. That is a Florida. It's not a flaw. I totally slapped you in the nose once, Alden said in English. And I called you a prick in front of your friends. Listen. You're not crazy. I am really here. I was on Munthagund. I ran into your aunt, Knight Alisart single quotage. I'm sure you know she's there doing something dramatic to the dirt. She used a creepy teleportation chamber on her spaceship to send me here. I was supposed to die for real, but I didn't. Instead, I landed in your forest. Since you're the only person nearby who I know, I thought I would come see you and say hello and ask if I could use your family's summonarium to go back home to Earth. Please. He managed to get it all out in a single breath, before Stuart could imagine any more flaws. And Alice. Stuart blinked for the first time since Alden had stepped into the room, then he stared down at the floor for a second and back up at Alden. I did think your clothing choice was peculiar for a hallucination. I would not normally imagine something that looked quite like that. Did you say my aunt teleported you here? She teleported me, and here is where I ended up. But not in our summonarium. Stuart said slowly. In the trees. Yeah. A few miles away. Stuart's fairly neutral expression underwent a rapid transformation, shifting through several different emotions so quickly that Alden wasn't sure he caught them all. Shocked, worried, confused, worried. Happy? He settled on something that looked like a cross between nervous and happy, and he stepped out from under Alden's grip on his shoulders. You walked here to say hello to me. He sounded both pleased and surprised. Out of everything Alden had just told him, he was sure that should have been the least noteworthy thing. You are my guest. Stuart said my guest the way Kibby said my magic lesson. The phrase had just a little too much fervor behind it for it to come across as normal. The primary's son clasped his hands together in front of his chest. You have traveled a long way, he said formally. May I offer you a cup of wevy? Alden closed his eyes for a moment. Of course there has to be wevy. I'd love one. Line of asterisks. Wevy at Stuart single quotage's house was an elaborate affair. He hurried from the room, leaving Alden to stand awkwardly in the barren space listening to the mysterious splashes from the bathroom, and then he reappeared several minutes later with a silver cart full of supplies. Fresh wevy fruits that resembled white papayas went into a press, then the juice went into a pitcher that looked like it was made of pink quartz, and then about 20 different spices, each selected from its own little silver bowl with a pair of tiny tongs, got dropped in with it. There was a somewhat mesmerizing chanting session over the pitcher, and then it started to steam. Despite the amount of effort involved, Stuart worked quickly, and with a kind of precision that made Alden think he was probably doing everything in a specific, mannerly order. When it was done, Alden took a sip from a cup that matched the pitcher. They were both sitting on the floor. Alden's new messenger bag full of books was beside him, and Stuart was across from him, watching him closely over the top of his own drink. This is actually good. Alden examined the wevy with surprise. Really good. The Artonan boy looked proud. Yes. Guests of the household always say that. Most people have only tasted the artificial kind. There aren't enough orchards to produce the fruit, so it's usually reserved for ceremonies. This kind isn't so slimy. I hate thick wevy, Stuart said with a deadly serious expression on his face. I always feel as though I am drinking someone else's saliva. Accurate. If the saliva was boiling hot and sweet. It's all they ever gave me at Leaf Song, Alden said. And we had the same kind on Munthagund. I had to drink 8 cups before first meal one morning. Stuart shuddered. When I was meeting with faculty members to make special arrangements for my classes. Alden raised an eyebrow. Can't you refuse? If the son of the primary couldn't, then was anyone safe? Now that I have established greater than myself as someone who doesn't refuse a beverage of welcome, it will mean things to people if I do. He sounded frustrated. Alden finished his cup, and Stuart jumped up to serve more. Alden was under the impression that they were still in the making small talk portion of their wavy drinking party, so he cast around for something to say. They didn't have many points of connection to work with. The only thing he could think of. How's your foot? Stuart looked down at the foot in question. He was wearing socks, so Alden couldn't tell what it might look like underneath. There is some lingering nerve damage, Stuart said dismissively. I will have it healed after I have finished contemplating my errors, weaknesses, and misconceptions greater than from that day. Yeah. There's that. Unique outlook on things. Not to be rude, Alden said hesitantly, but wouldn't it be alright to have it healed, and then continue contemplating? Do you still think I'm being a prick? Stuart said in a slightly injured tone as he passed back the fancy cup. You learned to say prick in English? I accessed the human internet in order to research all possible connotations greater than of the word as part of my contemplations. Alden almost spat wavy across the room. Don't do that, he said, aghast. He had never met someone who belonged on the internet less. Why not? Stuart looked at him closely. It must have been an important insult for you to have so bravely given it. And cultural research is best pursued greater than through native greater than sources. No. Alden wanted to melt into the floor. Listen, you're giving me way too much credit for bravery. And presence of mind. And accurate word choices. I had one thing I was capable of doing to help you, and you wouldn't let me do it. So I was frustrated and uncomfortable, and I insulted you because I couldn't understand you. Still don't understand you. There wasn't a lot of thought put into it on my end of things, Alden concluded. So you definitely shouldn't put so much into it on yours. Stuart looked unconvinced. I don't think you're a prick. The internet said. Alden waved a hand as if he could erase the internet from Stuart's mind. I'm me. We should trust me to interpret me, and leave the internet alone. During the thing with the Mishnan, I was thinking, oh no. A killerfish. Yikes. A boy with a missing foot. I think I should take the boy with the missing foot to a house of healing. Why is everyone here trying to stop me from doing that? Stuart sat back down and scanned Alden with his eyes like he was trying to memorize every dirty thread of the Hawaiian shirt. Is that all you thought? Alden almost said yes, but Stuart was a person who had taken a single insult so seriously that he'd spent the past several months researching it. Maybe it was better not to leave him to come to any conclusions on his own. I had a lot of thoughts. But they were based on ignorance, guessing, and stress. If you want to know what I think about things now, when I'm actually calmer, you should just ask me. Stuart nodded. Alden waited. No questions came. Guess he doesn't want my opinions on his actions, after all. Fine then. Time to change the subject. How's school? Congratulations on passing your entrance exams, by the way. I did pass them, Stuart said, as if he thought Alden might have doubted it. Well, Joe had said he'd be let in the school even if he failed, so maybe some people assume favoritism? I am in the top 7% or better in all of my classes. Cool. I have not invited a guest to the rapport greater than from among my classmates. I planned to. But then nobody was exactly what I was expecting. And bringing people here. It is delicate. Alden could imagine like 18 different ways for Stuart interacting with his classmates to be delicate. But it still shouldn't be that hard to invite a friend over for a weekend sleepover, or whatever the alien equivalent was. His family was operating on a different level, but they didn't seem like they were impossible to get along with. "Guess I kind of invited myself over," Alden said. "Sorry about that. Consider it a trial run." Stuart blinked at him. "I will." Alden finished off the second cup of wevy. "I should have asked if you were all right," Stuart said suddenly. You just teleported from a chaos incident into the forest. I should have asked if you were all right, but I was focused on my own state of mind. And then I was excited to have a guest. Guests are so dang important to him. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Are you? What? Are you all right? I'm good. You are very dirty. Well, I ran across a lot of the moon in this shirt. And then I fell down when I arrived. Stuart tilted his head. Were you injured on Thagund? Alden glanced down at himself. Yeah. I was. But I'm fine now. You don't need to worry. Your Aunt Psychorlax healer took care of me for an entire week. Roro. It was quite the experience. And I'm healthy now. Alden looked at Stuart's foot pointedly. Getting fully healed doesn't prevent contemplation. The boy sighed. My family says the same thing. Then why? It's an ancient practice, greater than, he said in an annoyed tone. I wish to follow it. For multiple, long-considered personal reasons. Alden examined him for a moment. Yeah. It's your decision. Sorry I brought it up after you'd already told me what you were doing. He snorted. I guess that was me being a prick. Stuart looked surprised. Then, he smiled. You are different than I thought when I first. He was interrupted by a loud thumping sound from the door where the splashing noises had been coming from all this time. Alden glanced over. What's in there? It's an indoor habitat greater than for my pet. More thumping. Scratching sounds. A plaintive trill. It sounds like it wants to get out. She does. I usually take her out for flight training in the evenings. She has excess energy, and it is necessary for her development at this age. She thinks I've forgotten. Flight training. Oh. Is she a Ryabi single quotee? Alden asked, the spark of an old interest rekindling. He had wanted to see one in person, but although they were supposedly common pets, he hadn't managed to spot one during his entire time with Leaf Song. Stuart nodded. I bought her egg several months ago. Can I see? The Artonan boy stood up. You should stand against the far wall, I think. She's never smelled a human before. She might be scared of you. Alden did as he was told, and a moment later, a scaled, horned, spiny thing with large wings hopped and flapped its way across the room straight toward him. The Ryabi single quotee was about twice the size of a full-grown cat. She looked a little like a dragon, but with smaller forelimbs than hind ones and more of a naturally upright stance that reminded Alden of bipedal dinosaurs. She was bright red, with blunted gold caps on her claws to keep her from scratching up the floors, and she sniffed Alden's knees and made a gurgling, enthusiastic squawk at him. Look out, said Stuart, hurrying over. She's going to, the Ryabi single quotee half-flapped, half-clawed her way up Alden's body to rest all 15 or so pounds of herself on top of his neck and shoulders while he hunched over trying to figure out how you were supposed to hold an animal shaped like this anyway. Pretty sure this isn't the way, he thought in amusement, as the Ryabi single quotee lost her grip on him and tumbled to the floor. Don't climb him, Stuart said in exasperation, grabbing the creature by one of the large hind feet and letting her hang upside down from his fist like a huge red bat. You are too big for that now. Alden stood up and examined the animal with interest. The Ryabi single quotee was damp all over, and through the open door, it looked like she had a whole terrarium and pool situation going on in her special room. She's awesome. She's a large breed greater than. Much faster and stronger than usual, Stuart said, lifting her proudly. The message carrying and flight competitions are only for child trainers, but I am teaching her anyway because exercise is good for her. Kawa. The Ryabi single quotee said exuberantly. She seemed to like dangling upside down. I do not think it is immoral to ask a healer to extend her lifespan, Stuart said, as he stroked the shiny scales on the P-T's neck. "So we will be together for a long time. And she likes the forest. I will import appropriate small game animals greater than for her to hunt when she is responsible enough to feed herself." It was the easiest conversation topic the two of them had found, so Alden leaned into it. He asked every question he'd ever had about P-Ts and got lots of detailed answers from Stuart, who was now letting the animal drape herself over his head despite what he told her about being too big for that kind of thing a moment before. One of her wings was blocking half of his face, and she was gnawing lightly on his ear. "I can't believe I didn't ask to start with," said Alden. "The most important question. What's her name?" Stuart stiffened up like a board. Alden frowned. "I mean, unless P-Ts don't usually have them?" Suddenly, the Artonan was blushing so hard his neck had gone from having a purplish undertone to being actually, undeniably purple. "She has a name," he croaked. "Okay. It's a normal name. Right. What is it?" Stuart's one visible eye shot up toward the ceiling, then down toward the floor, then off to the side like it was looking for answers around the room. "P-T," he shouted. And then he closed his eye, and his whole face dropped. Like he wanted to die on the spot. You're not great at lying, are you?" Stuart's face was continuing to gratify. "I have endeavored not to do it for so long that I believe I have lost the knack greater than for it," he said faintly. "If I ever possessed it. You don't have to tell me her name if you don't want to for some reason." Maybe he was one of those people who gave their pets stupid names on purpose and he didn't want to reveal that? But then some of Alden's brain cells sprang to life, and he remembered R'Lart just an hour or so ago, saying like the P-T. After Alden had introduced himself. "Stuart said he got her egg a few months ago. I knew it was weird that R'Lart recognized my name." Did you buy a pet and name it after me when you thought I died?" Alden asked, managing to hold back actual laughter but not his amusement. "Why would you do a thing like that?" She had said Stuart was upset Alden had died, but Alden hadn't taken it that seriously. "I'm so sorry," Stuart whispered. "I humbly apologize. I am very sorry. I don't mind at all. I think it's funny but not in a bad way. I just don't understand." He reached out cautiously and patted the P-T's warm, smooth wing. "You're a good girl, aren't you, Alden?" he said, just to prove he didn't have a problem with it. At the patting and the sound of her name, the P-T trailed. Stuart's eyes were still clenched shut. "I thought it was awful and sad that you had died. And that nobody on the true planets would mourn you. And I thought, maybe, based on things you had said during the incident, and my father had said in its aftermath, that I might have made the last few days of your life worse. So I decided I should mourn you. It was only a couple of bad hours. I don't think you should take credit for ruining entire days of my life." Alden paused. "And you weren't enjoying yourself either. Unless you liked having a limb eaten." And then exploded. "I didn't. I'm not a masochist greater than. Stuart finally opened his eye. "I researched on the internet how to mourn a human. Listen. You need to send me a message in the future every time you use Earth's internet, so that I can offer you some perspective in the things you might read there. Initially, I favored a funeral service in which a boat with your body in it was set adrift and lit on fire. Though further research indicated that it was not a traditional or common method, that would have been so much cooler than what my school did. As an alternative, I read that I could name my firstborn after you," said Stuart. "But we didn't know each other that well, and people should choose their own mourning names if they want to. Not have them bestowed by their parents. And I have already taken my own. Some Artonans took a mourning name in honor of a person who had died. It went at the beginning. Like the whirly in front of Joe's name. So instead you bought a P-T, Alden concluded. "It occurs to me now that you might find this insulting," said Stuart. "My family thought it was weird. I meant well, but if you hate it," Alden lifted the wing covering Stuart's face. "I like it," he said slowly. "It was a little weird. And it was also kind. I really doubt anyone else apart from my aunt and my friends cared that much that I was gone. Stuart stared at him. Can't I try holding the P upside down now? I feel like I should be allowed to. For obvious reasons. Line of asterisks. After that, Stuart didn't want to let Alden leave. He didn't say it. But it was clear. He kept finding excuses to talk about new subjects whenever the conversation hit a snag. Alden didn't know why the Artonan was so eager for company when he lived in a sort of mini neighborhood packed with relatives and other household members. But he did discover that Stuart had never really interacted with people outside of the community of night rapports. He lived here and gone to school here, and it was only now that he was in the wizard version of college that he was actually meeting the rest of the world. He seemed conflicted about the other students at school. Alden couldn't begin to unravel the nuances, but it seemed like they weren't what Stuart had hoped they would be and he wasn't what they'd hoped he would be, and everyone was mutually disappointed in each other. Finally, with a great deal of regret in his voice, Stuart said, "You wanted to go home. I shouldn't keep you here all night." Alden gave his namesake one more scratch on the chin and stood up. "Yep. Spent half a year in a corruption field. Now I get to rest." "You look like you need rest." One of those twins down the hall said that. "They are my cousins. And Alice's daughters." Alden turned to the door. "Let's go out the window," Stuart said suddenly. He strode over to what Alden had thought was a blank stretch of panel wall and pressed his hand to a spot. The wood slid back to reveal a wide window with an expansive view of the surrounding forest. "Why don't you keep that open all the time?" Alden asked, surprised. Half a second later, the other Alden crooned and raced across the room to leap at the window. Stuart grabbed her just before she could smash into the glass. "Never mind. That answered my question." He watched the Artonan boy drop the P into its habitat. "Why go out the window, though? If my family realizes that you are just here instead of here after being summoned, they will want you to form a contract with someone." At Alden's alarmed look, he hastily added, "Only the standard privacy of the house agreement. It's like a promise not to share certain kinds of personal information you might learn here. Anyone who works for us has to do it. I could argue that you are my guest, and therefore should be exempt, but I'm not sure." That was no big deal. Except that it was. Alden wasn't sure, but he thought that forming a contract might hurt like hell right now. The window sounds like a fantastic idea. It was too dark for Alden to see outside, but Stuart cast a spell to increase his own night vision and reported when the coast was clear. Then he casually jumped out of the second-floor window and landed on the ground below like it was only a short hop. Alden didn't think it was an ankle-breaking distance, but it still shouldn't have been that easy. The guy supposedly has physical enhancements, he remembered. Alden jumped too. He landed well, but it still sent a jolt through his skeleton. He grunted. "I should have cast a spell on you," Stuart said apologetically. "No. I'm fine." The summonarium was a fairly long walk away down a winding path. It was almost as large as the one at Leafsong. "Is it so big for teleporting in giant things? Or large numbers?" Alden asked as they entered. "Either. It's also easier to make them extremely powerful if they're large." He pointed toward a big runic design, and Alden went to stand inside it. "You should be getting an option to teleport away from there." Stuart's tone was curious. "I can't initiate a cycle for an avowed myself yet. But even if there was some reason for it not to directly teleport you out of the woods, the contract should have already forced you to. Shoe greater than? Alden had known that it wasn't normal for him to have unlimited wandering rights on the mother planet. He adjusted his grip on his bag. "It's giving me an option," Alden admitted. "But no timer. Maybe it thought I deserved some space after everything that happened." Stuart blinked. "Maybe it did. Bye." "Goodbye." "Teleport to Unzidora," Alden said, bracing himself. "Teleportation in 19 seconds. In a few months," Stuart said suddenly, "I will probably have a lot of time off from school. I think I will use it for cultural studies. I know you will still be on your official leave. But maybe I could arrange for you to come over then. And you could help me learn about human culture. If you wanted to be my guest again. Alden considered it. I would like that. But, we'd need to plan it out in advance. And agree on exactly how long I'd be here. Maybe just on one of my weekends or something. I'm going to have school and life and stuff going on, too, you know. Stuart looked happy. I know. What an unexpected ending to my first trip as an avowed. The teleportation hit him, and he was suddenly in the nothingness, where before there had been that completely baffling sense of his own authority wrapped around him and whatever he carried like a cocoon. It was different now. He could feel the shape of himself. Sore, grieving, enraged, struggling. Overly sensitive and feeling a little existentially electrocuted by the teleport because of it. But in a way, it was better like this. He was Alden Thorne. Whether his authority was bound into a skill or free, it was strong enough to keep him Alden Thorne through this. And through many other things, too. It was easier to understand that here. And then he was opening his eyes inside one of the teleportation bays on Anzidora. He took a deep breath. The air smelled like Earth. Earth totally had a smell. He smiled at the plain metal door in front of him. What a beautiful thing to know. Welcome to Anzidora, Mr. Thorne, said a voice. It sounded like it might even have been the same woman who'd done his security check the last time he came. But she was more flustered now. Just a minute. I see we're expecting you. And this is your first arrival as an avowed, but it's also your first return from the Triplanets. That's a new one for me. Let me call my supervisor about security procedures. Sorry for the delay. I don't mind waiting, Alden said. I'm just really glad to be home. Chapter 64. Alden was stuck in the teleportation bay for so long that he finally took a seat on the floor of the phone booth-sized space and rested his back against the wall. About every 5 minutes, the security lady updated him and apologized again for the wait. They'd asked him if he was claustrophobic before telling him he'd need to be here for a while. The problem seemed to be his very long stay on the Triplanets combined with his age and his lack of a psychological profile. They'd wanted to know if he'd been in a high-stress environment while he was away. Probably I shouldn't have laughed. Anyway, he was going to get a video call from a therapist who specialized in avowed trauma soon. That would help everyone figure out if he was a healthy, happy new kid who could go to the intake dorms with the other baby avowed who'd recently arrived. Or if he was a damaged superhuman who needed to be closely monitored and kept apart from the general population for a while. It makes sense. Not so much for Alden. What was he going to do, preserve people to death? But if you imagined an S-rank with serious offensive power suddenly arriving back home from a bad situation. Alden thought the Artonans would probably do a decent job on their end of things under normal circumstances. They didn't have a reputation for dropping dangerously unstable people back on Earth, as far as he knew. But that didn't mean the Anisidorans should completely trust the process. While he waited for his phone call, he rested his arms on top of his bag and access wardrobe with a mental command. He was just going to look at his tabs and his reward gift to make sure they were still there now that he wasn't on Artona. He didn't want to open the present yet because if random stuff started appearing in the bay with him that would only add to the worries of the people who were trying to classify his threat level. But, to his surprise, the image of the box in Christmas paper was gone. When he focused on the empty space where it had been, words appeared. From, Mother. To, a quiet rabbit. Alden was confused. But a couple of seconds later, the particular mode of light that would let him access his main menus started flashing. Alden selected it and saw the Privileges button glowing again. The present is a privilege. When he chose the button, he discovered a completely new option had been added to the category, and it was one he had never even heard of before. Choose persona. Temporarily forgetting his mental commands altogether, Alden lifted a hand and pressed it. Two large, semi-transparent information panes filled his vision. Each one had a picture of him as he currently looked, wide-eyed and dirty, in the top left corner. Each had a single additional tab with a logogram at the top. They both had a button at the bottom that said, Share Contract Verified Information. The windows held a breakdown of his full avowed profile. They included his rank, overall level, skill level, spells, stats, experience, all of it. Alden had seen this profile with the share button before, when he was playing around with his interface. It was obviously the thing you would need for applying to schools and jobs, where they wouldn't want to just take you at your word that you could do some particular magic thing at a certain level. But when Alden had seen it before, there had only been a single, accurate profile. Now he had two to choose from. And one of them was a lie. Name, Samuel Alden Thorne. Preferred name, Alden. Class, Rabbit. Rank, B. Overall level, 4. Commendation, exceptional bravery in the absence of obligation. Awarded by 4th General Law Alice Art single quote H. Skills, let me take your luggage, B. Level 3. Skill type, item preservation, single item, total flicker, F. Single level skill, skill type, minor enchantment interruption, temporary. Spell impressions, the haunting sphere, D. Light candle, F. Trait, Azure Rabbit. Trait type, movement, limited to element, ground. Enhancements, sympathy from magic +4, agility +3, dexterity +2.5, speed +2.5, stamina +1.75, strength +1.5, proprioception +1.5, appeal +1, visual processing +1, processing +1.75 in progress. Recommendations and merits, social recommendation Leafsong University, Artona 3 emergency response merit Leafsong University, Artona 3. Mr. Thorne, said the security woman's voice, we're detecting a significant increase in your heart rate. How are you feeling? Way creeped out now that I know the teleportation bay monitors my vital signs. I'm fine, he said, trying not to look as shocked as he felt. Just going through some messages from home. Everyone thought I was dead, so it's a lot to take in. I can imagine. Give us a few more minutes to sort you out. Yeah. Sure. No sweat. I'm good in here. Honestly, they could leave him to his own devices for the next hour, and he would probably still be trying to get over the fact that he now had a contract-verified fake persona he could use if he chose. But they probably aren't going to give me that long, so I should think fast. He compared the fake to his real one. His real rank and overall level was B9. He was guessing the star indicated his commendation from Alice Art single quote H, the one that had also earned him the embroidery shoulder patch design he could wear if he wanted. He couldn't think of what else it might be. And it was something way fancier than he'd realized if the system thought it was important enough to tack onto his level. His real skill section looked different, of course. Skills, let me take your luggage, B. Level 8 skill type, item preservation, total enchantment preservation. End results vary. I can see how this is going to start to look out of hand as I add new facets to the skill. Right now it was kind of like, well, the skill does two similar things. That's flexible. Lucky Alden. But if he underwent a couple more affixations, even this pared down, human-approved version of the description was going to make people do a double take and wonder what the heck it was. It's level 8. And since he hadn't taken another spell or skill, that meant the extra authority that was adding up to the 9th level had pretty much all gone to his foundational enhancements. The math doesn't quite work out between the profiles as far as apparent level value goes. Must be more wiggle room between how the system presents the numbers than you'd think. She had said Earth sometimes pandered to people's egos by rounding up. I bet the version of the profile a summoner sees is more accurate. Alden had not previously had access to something like that. But now there were the tabs with the logograms at the top of both the profiles. He selected that tab on the real profile and held back a groan at the sight of it. Why would you make something this unnecessarily complicated? It wasn't the profile at all. He thought it was more of a 90-page-long user manual for the Riabi single quotee known as Alden, but he wasn't quite sure. He suddenly understood what Joe had meant when he said there wasn't a big flashing sign announcing what his skill was, and that many Artonans wouldn't even recognize it. Presumably summoners got plain verbal talent function descriptions when they ordered up an avowed from the system. Maybe they say something like, "I need someone to preserve hazardous materials in a laboratory setting in a big hurry." And the system says, "Let me introduce you to this foolish rabbit who just bought a lab coat." But if the summoner wanted to dig into it and see how the foolish rabbit worked, they got this mess. It looked like it was lots of numbers plus some completely unfathomable magical codes. Like Alden was looking at the guts of a computer program written by aliens. And he was trying to guess what it was for. There were words that indicated he could preserve stuff. But beyond that, even with his new logogram flashcard translation perk trying to help him, it was indecipherable. The name bearer of all burdens was nowhere to be seen. I guess you learn how to interpret skill function in wizard school? Or, if Artonans were even a little like humans, most of them half learned it to pass their classes. Then they forgot it. And they just trusted the system's recommendations and the avowed's own word about their abilities when they needed to hire someone to do a job. Probably goes double for rabbits. If you're summoning someone in a hurry to do minor tasks, you're not reading through all of this. More interestingly, there were several completely different measures of Alden's rank in the profile manual, including one that let the summoner know he was an Earth B and another one that he kept staring at. It was being translated as priority rank. It was an absolutely massive number. And it constantly fluctuated. The more he thought about it, the more Alden felt sure that this was his literal rank and importance. Among all known intelligent beings living under the rulership of the triplanetary government, there are a lot of commas in that number, Alden thought as it was retranslated for him by the system. If I ever develop an arrogance problem, I'll just come here and humble myself. He compared the numbers on the real profile and the fake. They were both stupidly big. But the fake one was way higher. Real me is a much larger speck of dust in the universal scheme of things. Good to know. And on top of all that, there were so many other things to consider about the profiles. Apparently Earth liked to call Alice Art single quote H4th General in English. That seemed way off base tonally. She wasn't really commanding troops from what Alden had seen. He was going to have to look up what the system was calling her in other languages. It was also interesting that the fake profile was giving Alden a false skill and a false spell impression to explain away some of his abilities for him. Flickerer was clearly a cover for his new enchantment preservation. Light candle. It had to be something similar to the little hand cast spell that he'd been using to light the promise sticks for his lessons with Kibby. Maybe it was even the exact same one, just the infallible, locked into your being version of it they gave avowed. That's nice. It would have looked bizarre to people if I didn't have the second spell impression at least. But even with so many details to consider, Alden could barely pull his mind away from the most shocking thing about this gift. By adding on the tab with the logogram, the system was making it clear that this new fake profile was designed to lie to Artonans, too. Right now, the fake was enclosed by a gold border that said active persona along the left edge. This was the thing, it had to be, that the system used to tell wizards whether or not Alden was summonable for their job in the first place. It was what determined how he was actually used as an avowed. And she was going to help him lie about it. To a quiet rabbit, he thought in wonder. She was going to help him stay under the radar, like he'd said he wanted to. Somewhere, the security people must have been worried about his heart rate again. Because he could hear his own pulse in his ears. This isn't normal. This isn't even a little bit normal. All I did was wander around tracking dirt through the primary's house for a while and drink wevy with Stuart. This one stunning gift was something he'd never even imagined he could ask for. It was more than secrecy. Maybe it wasn't that big a deal at this point in time, but as he grew stronger, being thought weaker and less valuable by summoners would be a gift of safety. Alden hadn't realized just how desperately he wanted it until this very moment. He was hurt. And he was tired of being scared. And when the therapist finally called, he'd been crying a little despite enormous efforts not to do that in a small metal room where strangers worried about his mental well-being were watching him on cameras and checking his vitals. He blamed it on his aunt's voicemails and the school lunch lady, and as a show of good citizenship, he volunteered to share his contract-verified avowed profile information with the security people. Just to prove he wasn't some rare variety of dangerous rabbit. You gained 3 levels in half a year. And a star. We don't see many of those even from adults, said the woman who eventually came to escort him out of the bay. She had on a security uniform and a badge that said her name was Emily. Alden was pretty sure she was a speedster of some kind based on the way she moved. Great work. Really impressive. And I'm not just saying that to make you feel better. Thanks, he said, adjusting his bag on his shoulder. You get to hang out with me until they send a car to take you to the intake dorms. So many new teens coming in this month. I swear they all just got together and decided that September was the time to register. Have you had dinner yet? I haven't eaten all day. I think, said Alden. I might have had breakfast. But that could technically have been yesterday. I lost track of at least a few hours. Trips out there must be hard. I've never been. You like Jamaican food? I haven't had it before. It's from Earth, so I bet I'll love it. We've got a spot that just opened up in the atrium. Reminds me of my old home. Let me treat you and give you a proper welcome to your new one. Line of asterisks. Alden woke up at 2 o'clock in the Anisidran morning. The sheets on his new bed were soaked with sweat thanks to a horror soup nightmare featuring demons and a dead kibbe and running through trees, trying to get away from an unseen thing that wanted to hurt him. He was normally pretty good at going back to sleep after bad dreams, but he knew the second he opened his eyes that he wouldn't be able to right now. His freshly bound authority was roiling. It was a sickening, awful sensation. He took a few deep breaths, trying to calm himself and refocus. Don't be such a whiner, he told his authority finally, as if it was something separate from him instead of the essence of who he was. Avowed are supposed to bounce up from our affixations feeling mighty and blasting out new kinds of magic. He recalled how he'd started using the skill right away when he first got it. It had been really fun to experiment with it while Bo and Jeremy watched. It's so strange. I can't quite remember how it felt to not feel it. With a groan, he tossed off his damp sheets and rolled out of bed. A motion-sensitive light below the frame lit up as soon as his feet hit the floor. It illuminated the reddish faux wood flooring and the pile of Alden's dirty clothes at the foot of the double bed. This was a luxurious room by Alden's standards. There was a television on the wall with dozens of global streaming services. A small private bath held a shower that operated at human temperatures. There were effin' Apex cityscape sketches on the walls. Instead of curtains or blinds, the bedroom's window had an adjustable tint on it. When it was in transparent mode, like now, it looked out over the water of the Pacific Ocean. The intake complex was right at the water's edge on the far south side of F-City. And the apartment tower Alden was staying in was on the perimeter of the complex. Right now, there was nothing but miles and miles of dark sea between where he stood and Antarctica. He stared at the ocean for a while, until finally the fact that he was standing around stark naked started to bother him. He had just collapsed into bed without caring about it when he made it through all the hoops that had come with his arrival and he was finally left to his own devices. Now, though, it was a little odd to be a nudist. He glanced at his one filthy clothing option and wrinkled his nose. Nah. Can't sleep. Have money, he muttered to himself. There's got to be something better even if it is the middle of the night. His old wardrobe purchases, the housekeeping uniform and the cargo pants, were listed as in transit right now. He didn't know what that meant except that they'd been stored somewhere and were coming to him slowly instead of through the more expensive direct teleports into his arms. Anyway, what he wanted was underwear, socks, t-shirts. The wardrobe didn't really do basics. He wrapped a towel around his waist, opened the door and poked his head out to examine the rest of the apartment suite. It was empty. The other 3 bedrooms had their doors open just as they had when he arrived, and they were still unoccupied. The nighttime intake counselor who was in charge of the 2 rabbit floors, a middle-aged guy from Brazil with strong everyone's favorite teacher vibes, had told Alden not to expect roommates for at least a few weeks. Alden suspected that wasn't the norm. It was probably a stealthy accommodation to make sure he was okay without completely separating him from the other newcomers. But he was grateful for it, and he didn't mind taking advantage of the privacy. He headed into the living area, feeling almost as impressed with it as he had the first time he'd seen it. Effort had clearly gone into making a space that invited social interaction. There was a kitchen with a 2-burner stove, a microwave, a toaster oven, and the world's fanciest, right-designed magic coffee maker. Alden was intimidated by the number of features on the thing, but the counselor had said it was one of this particular apartment's talking points. The other one was a pinball machine in the corner by the sofa. Every suite had stuff like this, to encourage people to hang out with their new roommates and venture into other apartments to meet the neighbors. There was an entire cabinet stocked with coffee syrups, glassware, and mugs, in case Alden or any future residents wanted to be the dorm's barista. The idea was that a bunch of superpowered teenagers who'd left behind not only their homes and families, but also their countries and cultures, needed new friends fast. There was a calendar on the fridge and available through his interface that was filled with community activities and classes for the month, too. About half of them were completely optional, and the other half involved a credit system Alden hadn't looked into yet. It seemed like you had to attend a certain minimum number before you were allowed to leave and get your own place, unless you were heading straight into one of the school's boarding programs. He headed over to the counter where he dropped off the pair of large welcome gift bags they'd given him at the counselor's desk. He dumped them out, and shook his head again at the randomness of the contents. Candy, a bag of mixed nuts, deodorant samples, an enamel bunny rabbit pin, a stress ball with the logo for a dance studio on it, a dark green baseball cap with the Anisidern flag design on the front, an invitation to a rabbits-only welcome party that would be held in a ballroom somewhere in December, and coupons. Tons and tons of coupons. It turned out there was a fairly well-adhered-to-no system spam mail policy among superhumans. Having junk mail in your actual brain was just uncool. And since loads of avowed didn't bother to receive messages in any other way, advertisements on Anzidora came to you on paper. Alden started sorting through his coupons. All right, he thought. Which of you sells clothes and is open 24/7? He organized them all for his own amusement. The largest stack by far was for restaurants, but everything else a person might need was there, too. All new avowed got a decent Argold stipend every month for their first year and a half on the island. So they were probably an ideal target audience for advertisers. There were several clothing stores. Most seemed to be popular name brands from various countries, but a few were purely local. None said they were open all night. But there were errand runner services, and one of them was delightfully named Dragon Rabbit Gets You Things. The postcard was written in Spanish. Alden was decent enough at it to read the simpler words, but the system translation was helping. Dragon Rabbit would get you anything, anytime, day or night. Drone delivery available. Just try it if you didn't believe. 10% off for first-time customers. There was a picture of a dragon with bunny ears sitting on a hoard of food, accessories, and electronics. Alden felt compelled to put his fellow rabbit to the test. He held up the card. Call this person, he said. Voice or text only. A millisecond later a man's voice answered. Alden, this is Dragon Rabbit. You need things. I get them for you. Greater than. Alden was already inspired. Can't I get a couple of t-shirts and some jeans and boxers and socks and a pair of sneakers delivered by drone? Tonight? Yes. Greater than. Really? Cool. What do I owe you? How fancy do you want the t-shirts and jeans and boxers and socks and sneakers to be? Greater than. Alden found himself faced with a dark temptation. He couldn't sleep. And he had $12 million. And he was standing around in a towel talking to someone named Dragon Rabbit while he ate candy all alone in a luxury apartment. Actually, let me change my request a little. What I want is 500. No, 1,000 Argold worth of clothing, he said. I want stuff that fits me well. And I want to look like an average American teenage guy. Yes, greater than said Dragon Rabbit. I will get that for you. Authorize the system to send physical measurements. Greater than. I have a coupon. 10% off the service fee for first-time customers. Greater than. Awesome. He transferred the money. The thing was, it was no big deal if a complete stranger who didn't even use their real name cheated him out of around $3,000. Alden had never been rich before, and he wanted to see what would happen if you gave an unsleeping errand rabbit a mission and the money he needed to complete it. About 2 hours later, he got a notification from the intake facility's security person that a package had arrived for him by delivery drone. Several minutes after that, one of the dorm's own delivery drones, a rolling box with uncanny cartoon eyes painted on it, trundled into the apartment right by itself and spat a large parcel onto the floor by Alden's bedroom door. He spied on it through the crack. The drone quietly left, and the main apartment door shut behind it. Alden dragged the package into his room and opened it. He would have been happy, he thought, even if it was full of random ugly things that didn't fit. Novelty had its merits when you were trying to focus on anything outside yourself. But Dragon Rabbit was good at his job. Everything was new stuff, still in its original packaging or with the tags on. It was all pretty much the right size. And it was interesting to see how the errand runner had decided to interpret average American teenage guy. Alden could be preppy in a cable knit sweater and chinos. Or he could do jeans, strategically ripped or unripped, and a black t-shirt with a skull on it. Or he could wear a random fan football jersey for a team he did not know. There were also some plain colored t-shirts, a plaid button-down, a brown hoodie, 12 pairs of socks, leather flip-flops, and 2 new sets of sneakers, one a casual high top and the other a more athletic pair. Pajama pants, he said to his empty room as he held up some flannel ones. Nice touch. Didn't think of those. He'd also gotten a stocking hat. Who didn't want a nice stocking hat every now and then? It was all so human. It felt good to be surrounded by it. And it made the room look more lived in to have something to stick in the closet. After he was done trying on all the new things, he declared himself officially successful at surviving his first night back on his home planet. He managed to persuade the coffee maker to give him what he thought was a double shot of espresso, and he drank a sip while he sat on a counter stool in his non-ripped jeans and the skull shirt. He was thinking it was the ironic choice. Since he was not dead. Text this to Bo, he said. Hey. How do you drink coffee, anyway? It's bitter as hell, and I don't think it's just because I've been stuck on Webby for too long. It was 7 o'clock in the morning in Chicago. Alden finally thought that he could have a conversation with his friends without worrying about coming across as different in too many worrying ways. Bo should be up by now, and if he wasn't, he needed to be walking. The jerk hadn't even answered his "I'm alive" text from yesterday. Admittedly, Alden had said he would reach out again when he'd dealt with the Anzi Dora stuff, but complete silence from Bo was odd. Jeremy had texted back several illegible things before he'd finally gotten control of the autocorrect. Alden hoped he had slept. Bo didn't answer. Alden added non-dairy creamer to his espresso and stuck out his tongue at the taste. Nope. Still bad. He dumped it into the sink and poked different parts of the machine, trying to see if he could get it to spit out something better. It gurgled. He got hot water. He threw a tea bag he found in the supply cabinet into it and waited for it to steep while he stared at the light that would blink when his friend texted him back. It didn't. Text Jeremy, he said finally. Hey. You awake? I'm back on Earth and officially among the living. He got back 19 exclamation points, and a millisecond later, a video call came in. Alden accepted it, and Jeremy's face appeared, wobbling around as he held up his cell phone with one hand and walked through the living room into his family's big, industrial-chic kitchen. Alden took in the sight of his friend. He still looked just like Jeremy. Same haircut. Same slightly crooked nose. He had broken up in a skateboard accident before they knew each other. Seeing his face felt like time travel. But the speed of his answer and the slightly bloodshot eyes were unusual. He's probably been waiting around all night for my call. Sorry it took me so long, Alden said. He didn't know whether he meant the call or everything else. Jeremy just stared at him for a full minute. "I'm so fucking glad to see you, Alden," he said finally, leaning back against the sink. "Are you okay?" "I'm okay." "Yeah, but are you really okay? This is going to be a thing with everyone, isn't it?" He'd gotten an almost identical question from several total strangers yesterday. And even Stuart's single quotation, now that he thought about it. "I'm definitely more okay than I have been for the past several months," he said after a moment. "I'm glad to be home. I'm looking forward to doing normal stuff. Normaler stuff. I think I'm alright. Can't I come see you? Or can't you come back home for a while? Is that a thing we can do?" Alden nodded. "Yeah. At least on the you coming here front. I think it'll be a few weeks, though. And Zedora is good about immediate family travel passes, but friend passes are harder. The therapist yesterday mentioned it would be an option. I'm talking with her again this afternoon. I think she's going to put some kind of recommendation in my file to expand my guest list, since I've only got Connie. And Cli Zhao might be working on it, too." "Adopt me," Jeremy said immediately. "I'll be your non-avowed son." Alden felt a huge rush of relief. So they could still joke around with each other. It wasn't all going to be super serious. Thank goodness. My son who's 3 months older than me? Age is just a number. Alden grinned. "Yeah. Anyway, I'll adopt you or declare you my blood brother or something if I have to." They seem to have a really strong focus on getting new avoweds settled into life on the island with minimal friction, so it'll work out. How have you been?" "I'm fine, man. I've been here on Earth. Eating chicken nuggets and going to high school. And helping Aunt Connie. A lot," Alden added. "She mentioned you in like every other voicemail she sent me. Thank you for that." Jeremy looked surprised. "Well, yeah. Obviously I wasn't just going to let her deal with everything on her own. It turns out my mom really likes having her over for dinner every other Saturday. She's a lot more fun than the people from the law firm." Alden hadn't realized Jeremy had gone so far as to pull Connie into his family circle. "Jeremy, you might actually be a saint." "No. I'll let her put your stuffed wombat in her room. She and Mr. Tiger Shorts are getting serious about each other, by the way. The things that poor innocent creature has seen by now." Alden laughed so hard he spilled hot tea all over the counter. "Oh shit." He shook liquid from his fingers. "You're a cruel man. Why would you put that image in my brain? It's your punishment for making me think you were gone." Jeremy tilted his head. Can you tell me where you were? No details necessary if you don't want. Is it all top secret avowed stuff a regular human guy can't hear?" "It wasn't that Manon person, no. It was just a random accident," Alden said. "Mostly. I accepted a side quest from one of the professors at the university. To go to Munthegund. That's some planet near Artona. Jeremy asked. "Giant moon orbiting Kimner. It's not a very important place even though it's in the same solar system as the mother planet. I think it used to be more significant, but now it's a low-population backwater with a system that's been half-broken since before Earth became a resource world." He found a roll of paper towels in a cabinet and started wiping up the mess he had made. "Anyway, while I was there it went from half-broken to completely gone." Jeremy frowned. "Gone?" "Yeah. Like, no system at all?" "Yep. It was a total collapse. There's a big team of wizards there now. They are going to have to build a new one from scratch. It's something that takes a few months." "What was that even like?" "Inconvenient," Alden said dryly, tossing the soggy paper towels in the trash. "No teleports. No communications. I was on the wrong half of the moon, and there wasn't even something like a cell phone tower. Damn. So you've been roughing it on the moon for 6 months. Well, there was a giant mad scientist laboratory full of supplies. And a chaos event and some demons and a really cool little Artonan girl named Kibby." Jeremy's eyes were huge. "See. I realize now I should probably have opened with the chaos problem." Alden ran a hand through his hair. That was why the system went down in the first place. I haven't had a lot of practice telling the story. What the heck, Alden? They were very little demons. Like drunk LBs. Dude. And they were only around for a couple of months. Seriously? Chaos sucks. By the way. Much more than anticipated. Are you sure you're alright? I have a fancy coffee pot in my intake apartment. And a pinball machine. And I have $12 million. Okay. Jeremy's eyebrows were drawn together in concern. Those are all positives? Where's Bo? It just popped out. Alden had been planning to talk to Jeremy about other things for longer. But ever since the last unanswered text, he had a knot of something like panic in his chest. No voicemails from Bo in months, no mention of him from Connie or Jeremy. Jeremy looked away from his phone's camera. He's not dead, is he? Alden wasn't joking. Some part of him that was now a little too used to horrible things happening was really waiting for Jeremy to say, yes, Alden. Your closest friend died while you were away. He's fine, Jeremy said quickly. Or he'll tell you he's fine and get super pissed if you disagree. When he bothers to contact you. Once every 5 or 6 weeks. Or maybe that's just me, and he'll actually answer your messages. He says he's not ignoring me, that he just doesn't get my texts. But I don't know. What happened while I was gone? Jeremy's face was uncharacteristically serious. I think your death really messed him up, he said. Way more than I realized at first. And he decided you were dead right away, man. The same day the official missing on assignment, irretrievable status came in from the Artonans. He looked up some statistics on his phone, and then he said, so, he's dead. Oh. Jeremy groaned. Alden, I was so mad. I could have strangled him. Connie and I were both telling each other, we could hear back from him any second now. Wait and see. And he came into the conversation with that. Bo's not. Alden tried to think of how to put it. I don't think hopeful is part of his makeup. He's always been that way. He didn't mean anything bad by it, he just prefers to operate on facts. Alden understood it. When you had a choice between desperately hoping for something unlikely and moving forward with your life. Hope wasn't always better. There was a reason people held funerals even without a body. Denial couldn't go on forever. I get it. But it's still hard to deal with someone like that when you're in the maybe this isn't single quote really happening phase of your friend going missing, Jeremy replied. He apologized about it the next day. And then he was very nice for a while. To me and Connie and even people at school. Even the ones he hates. That was possibly the most alarming thing Jeremy could have said. He was great, actually, Jeremy admitted. For a few weeks. And I realize in hindsight that he must have been putting in crazy amounts of effort because emotionally supporting others is not something he usually does. Actually, Bo could be good at that despite his own protests to the contrary. He just very rarely made an effort to be. Jeremy probably hadn't seen it before. He finally. I think he just snapped. You were all over the local news. They dug up all the old body drainer stuff, they did. Alden hadn't expected that. Sorry. Once it finally got out, it was a big thing. Tragic victim of the worst supervillain incident in Chicago in recent years becomes a B rank avowed, gets summoned on his way into the consulate to register, dies on his first assignment. Jeremy gave him an apologetic look. You only blipped across national news for a couple of days, but here, it was 2 weeks worth of seeing pictures of you and hearing hot takes from random people about the dumbest stuff. Should traumatized youth ever be selected as avowed? Are Artonans evil for summoning 15-year-olds? Are humans evil for forcing 15-year-olds to leave their home countries? What did Alden Thorin's friends and classmates think of him? Ugh. They called me a traumatized youth. Like body drainer was still messing me up so bad I can't function? It was years ago. I can send you clips of some of it if you. I never want to see it, Alden said. It's just noise. With my name attached. Please tell me it finally died out. Jeremy nodded. Yeah, you're old news now. Your return from the dead will probably change that for a minute, But you can just refuse to comment, right? And it'll go away again. The internet will remember, Alden said darkly. Jeremy didn't disagree. Anyway, we were steeped in that. And then there was your memorial thing at school right before summer break, and Bo was mad about it. I could tell. But he didn't say anything. And he went to it and sat there like a statue for the whole service. Then, when I got home, the window was open in my bedroom and he'd dropped off your cat with a bag of food. There was a note on my pillow that said, "I'm taking a vacation from people." A vacation from people? He ran away from home. And everything else. Doesn't answer his phone. I was scared he had hurt himself or something, but he swung by around a week and a half later. He looked just as bad as he did at the funeral, and he was in one hell of a unique mood. Unique how? Alden asked, dreading the answer. Jeremy slouched against the sink. Honestly? He said in a near whisper. I think he wanted me to beat the shit out of him. He said the worst things to me. They were too fucking awful. To the point where I stopped being mad and started thinking he was actually going insane. Jeremy. Once he realized I thought he needed an exorcist instead of an ass-kicking, he punched my bedroom wall, apologized, and left. I haven't seen him in person since. I just get the occasional phone call. I thought maybe he'd come back when school started again, but he didn't. Alden didn't know what to say. Sorry. It's not great news to come home to. I know you two have been best friends for years. Don't worry too much about him. His last call was actually normal. We argued about movies for a couple of hours. He seemed like himself again. And I'm sure you being alive can't hurt. Bo, you weren't supposed to fall apart. He recognized that it was an odd thing to think. Why couldn't Bo fall apart? Time hadn't just frozen here at home while he was away. People kept moving and changing and dealing with stuff. He stared out over the apartment's living room area without really seeing any of it. Hey, said Jeremy, a note of forced cheer in his voice, you're going to see Connie today, right? Alden shook himself. Yeah. I think so. I thought I'd teleport her in later after I sorted some things. I have to find out if it's okay for her to come stay here at the dorm overnight or if I need to get her a room someplace else. Can I send Victor with her? Can you have pets? Alden blinked. I have no idea. Wait. Did you say Bo left the cat with you? Yeah. Your landlord is on a rat poisoning mission, and Connie was afraid Victor would eat one of them. There's fur everywhere in my room. I have to keep him in there because my dad and my sister are allergic. Victor's more of a street cat who deigns to let me feed him. He's not really a big fan of confinement. Isn't your room completely destroyed? He's used to it now. It's fine except for his weekly bath. Alden had never once attempted to bathe the semi-evil cat. He valued his body too much. About my room, though, said Jeremy, a strange expression on his face. Let me show you my new poster. Poster? Yeah, he said casually. Got it a few months ago. Haven't shown it to anyone else. I don't think we should talk about it. I think you need to see it. Sure. Jeremy was already working toward the stairs with his phone. A minute later, he opened the door into his familiar room and switched on the light. A shockingly fat and fluffy orange cat, with a collar and a bell, was stretched out on the duvet. My poster, said Jeremy, striding over to a brick wall and turning the phone toward it so Alden could see. It's Yellowstone National Park, said Alden, baffled. That's outdoorsy of you. Right? Jeremy's tone was odd. Make sure you take a good look at this part. While Alden watched, his friend pried up the tape at the bottom of the poster and lifted the paper. There was a hole in the wall. Not a massive one. But a couple of bricks were missing, there were some cracks, and the copper pipes on the other side were visible. Yellowstone, said Jeremy, dropping the poster back. I spend a lot of time thinking about it. Alden stared. Jeremy. Did you say Bo tried to hit you? No. I was on the other side of the room. Guy just needed to relieve some tension. Hit the wall. After I refused to beat him up. Jeremy paused. Apparently he has a lot of faith in my workout routine. Alden laughed. He wasn't sure if it was actually funny or if he was just too shocked for another response. "That asshole," he said finally. "Such an asshole," Jeremy agreed. "Such a skinny, pale, weak-looking asshole." They both stared at each other, and then, for some strange reason, they burst out laughing at the same time. "I really missed you," Alden said when they'd stopped cracking up. "Sorry everything got turned sideways because of me. But I really did miss you so much." Chapter 65 "So," Alden said at the conclusion of a very long voicemail to Bo, "Jeremy is an angel among men. And I can't believe you thought you could really get him to hit you. You bastard. I will be calling you every day and leaving messages, even if you never reply. But you'd better. I'm just sorry about it all. Take good care of yourself. Talk to you tomorrow." He ended the call and waited a minute just in case there was going to be a reply. When there was none, he flicked off the kitchen lights and stepped out of the apartment. As the door shut behind him, he heard the bolt slide into place automatically. It opened in response to a command he could give through his interface, too, so there was no need to keep track of keys. "Oh, hey," said a voice. "New neighbors." Alden looked up to see a tall blonde girl exiting the apartment across the hall. She was wearing faded jeans and a long-sleeved cropped shirt. She had a mild southern drawl, and she was carrying a tray covered in clear plastic treat bags. "She's gorgeous," Alden thought. Then he had to stop for several seconds and analyze that thought. Because it had come on confusingly strong and quickly. He did notice when other people were nice to look at, but it was in the same way that he took note of whether or not he liked the appearance of a plant or a painting. He had been trying to avoid overthinking it or defining it before he was summoned. Not quite getting something that was so important to others made him feel left out. Either being away from his own species for too long had done something unexpected to him, or the neighbor girl was really, ridiculously beautiful. "It's the second," he concluded. "I'm still me. She's just an extra amazing painting. Wait, is that an okay thing to think about someone else?" She was the same height as him. Athletic. She had one perfectly charming dimple to go with her warm, perfectly charming smile. Her skin was flawless. Her eyes were an impossible shade of gold, with brighter gold around the pupils. Her face was so symmetrical, except for the strategic dimple, that Alden was sure he'd need a computer to find so much as an eyelash out of alignment. "Do you want a treat bag?" "Sorry." He shoved away his fascination and blinked down at the hand she'd just extended. "A snack bag," she said brightly, waving it at him. She was still propping the door to her apartment open with a hip. "It's got my card on it. I made enough for everyone on our floors." "Oh. Thanks." He took the bag. Even her voice was remarkable. She sounded like she could host radio shows. "It's homemade granola. You should take some for your roommates." "I don't actually have any," Alden told her before she could pass him more bags. "I'm the only one in the apartment from now. I'm Alden. From Chicago. Hi. My fellow ex-American. I'm Natalie. From South Carolina." She tapped on the business card she had attached to his bag, and he glanced down to see that it said Natalie Choir, room 914, cook of the moment price on request. Cook of the moment. Alden felt enlightened. The S-rank rabbit skill. He was betting she'd gotten some extra foundational enhancement points to allocate as an S-rank, and that most of them had gone into appeal. Natalie beamed. "You've heard of it?" "Yes." "Awesome choice. I heard one woman who has stopped a deadlock at the UN with a single pasta dish." "Oh my gosh," she gushed. "She's so cool. When I got here a couple of weeks ago, and word went around that there was a new rabbit who'd chosen it, she teleported it in from her job on her Tona 2 just to make dinner for me and my roommates." "What was that like?" Alden asked curiously. She stared off into the distance. "Dangerous. One of my friends cried when we had dessert because the meal was almost over." Alden was now really looking forward to eating the granola. But maybe not in front of other people. "Thanks for making it vegan," he said, holding up the bag. "Oh yeah. Vegan, gluten-free, no peanuts. For my advertising snacks I always try to hit as many diets as I can without ruining flavor. Wait, how could you tell? She peered down at her tray. It doesn't look off or something, does it? She sounded anxious about it. As if someone rocking an S-rank skill might really need to worry that her free, magically perfect food would offend a bunch of hungry teenagers. I'm just a good guesser. It looks great. He tucked it into the pocket of his hoodie and headed down the hall. Natalie Quire let her apartment door shut and tagged along after him. I haven't seen you around. Did you just get in yesterday? Last night, said Alden. You said you've been here 2 weeks? Yeah. Me and all my roommates arrived within a couple days of each other. They try to fill whole apartments at once, so don't worry. You won't be on your own for long. Alden suspected he would, but he didn't see any reason to explain that. How many rabbits are here right now? 183, she said promptly. Now since you're here. You memorized the exact number? For the snacks. She held up the tray again. I've already delivered another one of these to our counselor's desk. She kept filling him in while they waited in a large community space for the elevator to arrive. There were beanbag chairs and an air hockey table. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out on the next building over. Natalie said that apartment tower was almost entirely for brutes. Staying here in intake has been way more fun than I thought it would be, she said. I was going to go straight into the School for the Arts at Chelena North High as soon as I arrived, but then I decided it was better to settle in for a couple of months after all. It's a relief, you know, to be surrounded by other people who are totally new to the island. I can see that. It's probably easier to figure it all out with people who are in the same position. Of course there would still be newbies in the Apex High School's dorms, but a larger percentage of the kids their age would be native Anisidrans. Shapers and healers are on the floors below us, Natalie said. And meisters and adjusters are above. There are only a few U-types here right now, but they have their own floor at the top of the Brute Tower. They don't mingle a lot. Rights are in that square, blocky apartment building. And sways are over there. She pointed at a low brick structure that looked distinctly prisonish. It's actually very nice inside. They mingle even less than the U's. I think they have their own community building activities for credits. Oh, and any Rs usually get mixed in with the healers or us rabbits. She paused for breath just as the elevator arrived. They stepped inside, and Alden pressed the button for the next floor down. It opened onto another community area, this one dominated by a large circular desk with a scrolling digital sign across the front that listed currently ongoing dorm activities. Right now, it said breakfast in multiple languages. New counselor, Alden noted as he stepped out of the elevator and spotted a young woman with brown skin and an edgy-looking undercut hairstyle. She was filling some of the welcome gift bags. She must be the day shift person. She didn't wear a physical name tag, but she had one through his interface. Nia floated at the top right corner of his vision. Hi, Nia. Natalie said, setting the tray of granola beside another one that was already there. Hey again, Nat. She had an Anisidran accent. She looked past the girl to Alden. And Alden, she added. Do I have a name tag, too? He asked, surprised. No. You can if you want one. There's a setting. But I actually just got in and got an update on your situation. It had a picture of you from last night. And there's a note saying you arrived without luggage. I was about to call and ask if you needed someone to go get basics for you. Alden shook his head. I'm going to wander around the neighborhood and buy some stuff on my own, if that's okay. You're not a prisoner. Go. Be free. Call me if something goes wrong during the day, even if it's just something minor. There's a loosely enforced curfew while you're staying in intake, but it's midnight. Until then, nobody will bother you. She paused. You want a buddy? A buddy? There are volunteer mentors who take new kids and show them around. I can have one meet you? No thanks, he said. I'd rather just explore. But I wanted to ask about having visitors in the dorm. Depends on the visitor. Random locals, no. They would flood the place if we let them, and it's supposed to be a haven just for you new kids. Pre-approved tutors or class mentors, yes. Family? Oh. We can't teleport in guests from home for the first few months at all, Natalie said in a sad voice. Didn't your pre-arrival guide tell you? Nia glanced between her and Alden questioningly. She raised an eyebrow at him. She obviously wasn't going to bring up his business in front of people without his permission. He figured it would all get out eventually, but there was no reason to rush it. Thanks anyway, he said. I'm going to walk around and buy myself a toothbrush. Dental hygiene, said Nia, turning back to her gift bag prep. Always important. Before Alden left the building, he stopped briefly on the second floor to check out the cafeteria. But as soon as the door opened and the sound of a throng speaking a dozen different languages hit him, he retreated. So many people. Too much input. Not even the smell of hash browns could tempt him. He shook his head at himself as he strode out the building's front doors into the cool, clear morning. I wish I could have a quiet first meal with Kibby. Does that make me crazy? He turned down the sidewalk and headed toward a set of gates that led onto the street. A security guy opened them for him, and he was officially working around in F-City as a proper vaud for the first time. It was so surreal. Here was a human city, full of city sights and sounds. There was traffic. People were out jogging. Someone was walking a Shih Tzu. A week ago, Alden had been living in a vault on a silent moon with a single other person. He wondered if he'd have felt just this out of place if he'd gone back home instead of coming to Nzidora. I think it might actually have been worse, he decided as he watched a guy around his own age do push-ups in a narrow stretch of grass along a bike path. He had an honest-to-goodness boulder on his back as an extra weight. One of the green ball caps they gave you in your welcome gift bags at the dorms was on the ground beside him. Where does one purchase a boulder anyway? Did he bring it with him from home? Nzidora was artificially made. It wasn't like the other teen could have dug his pet rock up out of the ground or taken it from a convenient mountain. I think it might be easier to try to fit in with Boulder Guy than it would be to try to fit back into my old life. I hope so anyway. He kept walking. His interface offered him maps and notifications about the businesses he was passing, but he turned the helpful feature off with a thought. He decided he wanted to see things with his own eyes and figure it all out the old-fashioned way. It was a distraction. Distractions were good. His new affixation was still a giant weight on his mind. He wanted to ignore it. I think this is a low-rank neighborhood, he decided as he watched a yoga class rolling out their mats through a studio window. It wasn't like locations in F-City were deliberately sorted by rank and class. That was a more common thing in Apex, to make sure really powerful people could use their talents without accidentally killing squishy ones like Alden. But even here on the southern portion of Nzidora, people tended to group together with those who had similar needs and lived similar lifestyles. So maybe this was a DNF-heavy community. Boulder Dude was by far the most conspicuously superhuman person Alden had spotted around here, and he'd come from the dorms. He walked on, peering through shop windows and people watching. The weather was around 50 degrees. The sun was shining. Alden found a Mexican restaurant with a walk-up breakfast window and ate an unholy amount of chips and guacamole while he sat on a bench and counted drones in the sky. He tried to remember if he'd ever seen a bird on Nzidora apart from the decorative geese and ducks in the parks, and he couldn't. I hope we have seagulls or something at least. No birds at all would be depressing. A voice call notice flashed, and he answered when he saw it was Nia from the dorm. Hey, the intake counselor said. I was going to call you right after you left, but mornings are always busy. Took me an hour to duck into my office so we could talk without being overheard. You said you wanted to bring family into your apartment? I booked a teleportation slot for my aunt. I'm going to pick her up in an hour and a half. You haven't seen her since you got back home. She sounded sympathetic. I haven't. I literally teleported in straight from the Triplanets last night. Gotcha. So, like Natalie said, there is a rule against having family visitors, but it's not a dorm rule. It's a delay in guest approval for newcomers to the island in general. As far as your own guest list goes, They must have decided to treat you like you became a resident half a year ago when you were registered. Why no guests for new people? He asked. There was a brief pause. It's because a lot of kids are homesick, and seeing family regularly actually makes it harder for them to adjust. Some people spend 16 hours a day staring at their old life through their interface. We discourage that however we can, but it happens way too often. In some cases there are also just family dynamic problems. Parents who want to involve themselves way too heavily, coattail riders, anti-alien cultists who'd rather murder their own children than see them under the contract. Hopefully not too many of those last ones, Alden thought. Your intake period is your transition, Nia continued. Between whoever you were before and who you want to be now that you've got new powers, new responsibilities, and a new home. And it's a big transition. We try to make sure everyone gets a fair shot of making that leap in their own way, with as little outside baggage as possible. That makes sense to me. Well, I'm glad. Your situation is pretty unfair. Usually as soon as you register, it sets a whole pre-arrival process in motion so that you get a lot of time and help thinking about these things before you make your final landing here on the island. Not everyone takes advantage, but plenty of people spend their last 3 months settling things with their families and friends and crossing stuff off their to-do lists. I didn't do any of that. I don't see how you could have. And actually, I want to recommend that you schedule a couple of private planning sessions with either me or Gus so we can help you figure out what exactly you want to take care of before you launch yourself full tilt at. I don't even know what you think you might want to do with yourself after you leave intake. I can usually pull up a list of a kid's personal goals so I can make sure they're not swimming out to sea. Swimming out to sea? That was a very unconsiderate way of saying going off track, he guessed. Gus is the night counselor? That's him. Gustavo. And to answer your original question from back before I went off on a tangent, yes. You can absolutely bring your family member back to the dorms with you. Just be aware that most people don't get to, and don't rub anyone's nose in it. I won't. Alright, I'll let you go. But first let's do my own personal get-to-know counselor knee icebreaker. Alden brushed corn chip crumbs off his leg and smiled. What is it? Ask me what the worst thing about being a rabbit is. What's the worst thing about being a rabbit? I'll be straight with you, Alden. It's the fact that if you're very talented at your job, the Artonans keep you busy. It can be the same for other avowed. But more so for us. We just tend to interact with them a lot more because for some reason, despite saying things to the contrary, wizards seem to want friendly domestic help way more often than they want hard-bitten warriors. They should boost rabbit numbers. Don't know why they keep it so low. Anyway, I spend about 2/3 of my year on the Triplanets. It's good work, but I don't need it at this point in my career. And I still get called to do it. That is a ton of work time for an avowed, Alden said, surprised. Even for a rabbit. Her skill set must have been really valuable. And she must basically be counseling new rabbits out of the goodness of her heart because there was no way she needed the money. It is, she agreed. Now ask me what the best thing about being a rabbit is. What's the best thing about being a rabbit? You get the extra special answer I reserve for my S-ranks and my very busy bunnies who start getting themselves zapped to the Triplanets weekly before they're even out of intake, eternal youth. Alden blinked. Isn't that more of an elite healer thing? It's an elite thing, she said. Plain and simple. Here on Earth, you've got to have an obscene amount of money for it and get your hands on the right healer ahead of everyone else who wants them. On the Triplanets. Only slightly less obscene. But it's easier to actually find someone who can give you rejuvenation treatments. And frequently summoned rabbits spend enough time on the Triplanets to make that happen for ourselves. Think about it. I will, he said. No. I'm serious. Think about it. Before you spend whatever money they must have given you for that teleporter disaster they put you through. I became an avowed in 1964, and, holy shit, Alden blurted out. I thought you were in your early 20s. He'd also thought from her accent that she was a native Anisidoran, but the place hadn't even existed then. I was in my 20s, Nia replied, when I jumped all the way off the aging train and waved goodbye to it. She does not act like an old person. I know what you're thinking. Wow, she doesn't talk like an old person. Kids always say stuff like that. You don't get a special old person personality when you hit a certain age. Old people are just members of a different generation than you, which is to say, a different peer group. They usually act like they're friends instead of yours. Alden guessed that made sense. When you stay young forever, you naturally tend to make friends with other young people. Or eternally young people. Or high-class wizards. Makes you a bit different, but it's not a bad thing. And it more than makes up for the main bad thing about being a rabbit. Being away from Earth so much? Her voice was serious. I intend to see more than a human lifetime's worth of sunrises right here on the planet where I was born. I'll just do it at a different pace than most people. Alden didn't know how he felt about that announcement. But he had to admit that, as far as icebreakers went, Nia's was pretty mind-blowing. Anyway, she said, I just wanted to give you the special talk before you bought a house or something. You might not know if you're the kind of rabbit who gets summoned all the time yet, but you had this one terrible and no doubt lucrative incident. So, advice from an old person, save it. In case you decide you want to be laughing about this phone call with me in a century without your mind and body suffering from the ravages of time. Despite what all the fiction tells you, death isn't the main thing that makes life meaningful. I like being alive even more now than I did when I was your age. Well, consider that. Have fun with you, Aunt. She hung up and left Alden blinking up at a gleaming red drone, feeling bemused. Yeah. It might take me even longer than I thought to get used to all of this. Line of asterisks. Alden took a city bus to the teleportation complex. He sat beside a shaper of life who was wearing vines as accessories. When he entered the building through the automatic doors, he had a strange moment. He thought he heard an extremely loud toilet flush. He looked to his right in confusion. I guess there's a bathroom over there. It was right beside the big metal post drop he'd used to send his letter to the Volrus. That was forever ago. At least they probably won't bother me while I'm staying in intake, since there's a no random locals policy. He kept walking. He heard another toilet flush. He wondered if they had really insane plumbing in that restroom. A few minutes later, he finally got to see his aunt face to face. He was glad they'd had the emotional, tear-jerker phone call while he was still hanging out in the forest. Mostly what he felt when she ran out of the local arrivals hall at the teleportation complex was pure happiness. They threw their arms around each other and hugged for ages, while she shouted in his ear about the fact that he'd gotten taller. When they stepped apart, he said, "You're imagining things. It's just a quarter of an inch. You measured yourself as soon as you got home. You're not still racing Jeremy, are you?" She smiled. "I hate to tell you this, but he's winning." He laughed. "I only know because I had the system send my measurements to some guy named Dragon Rabbit so that he could buy me clothes. He was 176.4 centimeters tall. You said you didn't need clothes. I was going to pull your things down out of the attic, maybe later. I thought it would be more fun if we went shopping." It was a good day. They spent most of it wandering around Rosa Grove Mall. It was the largest shopping center on the island. There were hundreds of stores, and in between buying too much stuff and eating too much food, Alden managed to put together a picture of his aunt's current life. She had been devastated he was gone, but these days, she was mostly happy. He could tell. Mr. Tiger Shorts, actually an RV salesman named Brody, was okay. He had a big messy family, and he'd introduced Connie to them. Alden was glad, though a little overwhelmed, to hear her chatter about all of the man's cousins, step-siblings, and siblings like they were characters in a show he'd never seen. In turn, he talked a lot about Kibby and all of the interesting, not awful things he'd experienced while he was away. Late in the afternoon, they split a celebratory cupcake in honor of the fact that they had missed each other's 16th and 33rd birthdays. And Alden decided it was a good time to broach a subject he hoped would only be slightly awkward for them both. "Can't I give you money, Aunt Connie?" without it being weird. "No," she said, licking a finger and using it to pick up stray sprinkles from the cupcake wrapper. "I really want you to let me. I have a lot more than I need, and it would make me way more comfortable about leaving home." She considered him for a moment, scanning his face with blue eyes that sometimes made Alden think he really remembered exactly what his mother's had looked like. "I left home at 16, too," she said finally. "I thought the world owed me something grander than life in a trailer park in Tennessee. Pretty different from what you're doing." "I know." Connie rarely mentioned it. Both of Alden's maternal grandparents had died a couple of years later. Alden thought, mostly based on context clues and not anything he'd ever been told for sure, that his mother had never forgiven her much younger sister for breaking their parents' hearts. "I meant to grow up," she said. "At some point. But I felt like everything was forcing me to do it all at once when your mom died, and I think maybe I missed a couple of steps. Because I was busy feeling sorry for myself." "You did fine." She reached for her drink and jabbed at the ice in the cup with a straw. "You didn't tell me," she said finally. "When you got selected as an avowed. I just kept thinking about it, every night lying in bed after you went missing. The fact that you didn't tell me right away." Alden took a deep breath. I was always so disappointed in my parents when I was a teenager." She looked down at the melting ice. "I don't even know why. They were good people. Maybe I was angry that they weren't impressive people. Or something like that. But if I'd been chosen as an avowed when I was your age, I know I'd have run straight home to my mother and told her. Because even though I was ungrateful, deep down I knew I could always count on her for the things that really mattered." Alden sat frozen across the pink laminate table from her. "I'm sorry I didn't give you that," she said finally. "When you're a kid, you need grown-ups you can trust like that." "And Connie," Alden said quietly, "I trust you. Don't you love me?" She rubbed a single tear away from her cheek with the palm of her hand. She smiled at him. "There's a difference. And I think it might be okay. It might be best. If you were mad at me. A little. I wasn't too young or too dumb to know I should do better. I knew. You were just so mature for your age, and I kept using it as an excuse to let you take care of yourself. And you should be mad about that. You were supposed to have more." She stood up suddenly and started clearing the trash before Alden could even begin to respond. "Anyway," she said in a brisk voice as she came back from the recycling bins and shoved her chair under the table, "you said you wanted exercise clothes and weights. So we still need to go to the athletic supply store." "Ah. But. Okay. According to the map on my interface it's on the 4th floor." He stood up, too. "Also, I didn't want weights. You need weights. Or you need to go to that place full of the sweaty, grunting people we passed on the way over here." "The brute's only gym," said Alden. "Why?" "You picked the bunny class, baby. People are gonna pick on you. You need to be able to protect yourself. Nobody's going to pick on me. And if some of them want to, then going to the gym is not going to stop them." He did want to find a good gym, but not for that reason. "We'll get you some pepper spray, then," she said. She narrowed her eyes. "Or bear spray. And a knife." "Sure. Carrying those around will make me look so approachable while I try to make new friends." Tobe continued. "Thanks for listening.